It has finished counting down, and therefore we're live. Well, we're not live, we're recording. But hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I am Michael Vincent, and I am always the Sustainiac. Today, my distinct pleasure, been chasing him for a while, but he's finally agreed to come on, is Adam Wozniak. He is a notable leader in sustainability for 2023, according to Plastics News, which I trust completely. He is a senior manager of sustainability. And Adam, I'm just going to read this real quick, supports the concept of circularity in plastics, viewing it as a practical solution to the environmental challenges of our time. He promotes building a transformative pathway to sustainable material design in plastics, steering the industry towards carbon reduction through the utilization of post-consumer, post-industrial, bio-attributed, biocircular, biopolymers, and advanced molecular recycling technologies. Let's say that 10 times fast, and then we'll each take a shot of whiskey, and then we'll try it again. And we'll just keep going, right? Until someone makes a mistake. What do you think, Adam? That'll just be the show.
Listen, I say it every day and I get excited to say it. So it's one thing that if you want me to say it 10 times fast, I'm happy to say bioattributed, biocircular, biopolymer, advanced molecular recycled, whatever you want me to say, I'm happy to do it. So
okay, that's impressive. You win. You win, Uncle.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious on top of it too, as well.
Now so, that I can say. The other stuff, I'm out. Once you get past Mary Poppins, that's where my education stops.
Yeah, listen, Michael, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be a part of this. Really, what I look to do is just amplify the messaging that's out there in regards to plastics and polymers. And I really do believe those statements, and I live by those every day, that I believe that plastics in general, now today more so than ever, have the potential to be a part of the solution to the pressing issues, the pressing environmental issues of our time. And when we look at, the segments that are there, when you look at the intersection of plastics, people, producers, consumers in general, at that intersection, it's the empowerment of people and the collaboration that has to happen in order to make a change. So what you do, I have to commend you on that, is that, you get the voice out there in regards to sustainable design. You help us to kind of build a message that's out there, and we kind of amplify it as much as we possibly can. But really, at the end of the day, that's the important thing, is getting the human connection that's there. We're the chemistry between polymers and people. But we also have to kind of be that linkage. We have to be the kind of conduit that helps exemplify it so people can understand the technologies. And one of the biggest things that we run into from a limitation perspective is people understanding, that there are technologies out there that are complementary to each other, that can advance carbon footprint reduction, that can advance getting more recycled content into products. So for me, I get excited. One thing that I do not lack is energy. So I tend to get excited about numbers. I get excited about facts and figures. But what I can say is that I get more excited. What gets me out of bed in the morning is being able to come up with solutions for customers, taking pain points and letting people know that in the medical and the healthcare market space, there's sustainable solutions that are out there available that can be utilized today. Talking to folks in the aerospace industry, that, letting them know that sustainability is real and we can present sustainable solutions without physical property loss or missing regulatory compliance. So that's where I get really excited, is that, not only can we do the traditional recycling that comes from your home, from your recycling bin, and then gets turned back into a product, we can take it 10 steps further when we talk about bioattribution and when we talk about advanced molecular recycling. That's where I think a lot of the onus is going to be today, especially for industries that may find it difficult to do traditional recycling.
Yeah, and that's a mouthful, but I follow everything that you're saying, and I agree with it 100%. And you spoke about a whole bunch of stuff, and there's things just in that quick, paragraph that I recited to introduce you on the things that you're doing. I mean, what you said, we could spend years unpacking what you just spoke about, or we could take one little thing, just like talking to people in the aerospace engineering and saying, listen, you don't have to use lose structural integrity to be able to use reprocessed or recycled or reusable materials or content in your thing. And I think a lot of people don't understand that stuff. Certainly the layperson running around has no clue. They don't even know what they're allowed to or not allowed to recycle, right? Let alone what is real. I was reading a thing today, and I'd like to just get your thoughts on it, real fast, because it's highly topical. Is um, plastic industry has been lying to you for 30 years about recycling. I'll just leave it there. Your response.
Yeah, so my response is it's multiple pronged. I mean, I think one thing that the plastics industry has not done well enough, and I can tell you that today, Michael, we have a lot of voices out there that are better than what they've been in the past. One thing that really becomes important is transparency. And when we talk about transparency, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, transparency was probably clear as mud. Um, what I can tell you now is that with legislation that's coming forward, transparency is going to be not only integral, but transparency is going to be necessary. So one thing that the plastics industry really has to do is number one, we have to share success stories on what we've done in the recycling field. We've got to amplify those success stories, and what better way to do that by showing something that's really visual, that's very very tangible. So there's got to be more collaboration that's done there to kind of get that word out. I can tell you that the plastics industry as a whole has done a better job getting messaging out there saying that recycling is real. And what do they mean by that? Physically showing products that are starting in the home, going into a recycling bin, being picked up by a waste services, waste management system, and then getting recycled back into the system and finding that back in your home. And again, that's really visual. That's very tangible. But what it comes down to is that transparency. We need to have third-party certifications. We need to have certifications that the consumers can see, not only consumers but the brand owners and the converters, because it looks like the brand owners, they know what they want. They want sustainable materials. They want carbon footprint reduction, and consumers are asking for it. But what we have to do is we have to be able to deliver a product in a clear and transparent fashion. So chain of custody is very, very important. And
Yeah.
having systems in place to actually show that transparency, to say, here's where your product was created. It came from this grave, and we dug it out of this grave, and we picked it up, and we converted it into this particular product. And it went to this particular warehouse, and it was converted by this particular plastics converter, and it ended up in your finished product. We need to be able to show that full circle transparency of how that was there, but then also be able to track and trace the components that are in there. So if it's containing 50% post-consumer recycled content, where did that 50% post-consumer content come from? How did it end up in the final mixture? What quantity is in there? I'm a big advocate too, as well as beyond, transparency and having a clear chain of custody. I think that having a consumer-facing label is a huge victory for the market space. I mean, it's kind of the holy grail where, we can go shopping and we can choose a food product and we can find all the caloric intake. We can find how many calories it contains. We can find out whether or not it has gluten, how much caffeine. Well, if we can put a label on a box to give us the actual content and ingredients in a specific product, we should be able to at least put a QR code on our packaging that says, hi, I'm made out of polypropylene. Here's how you can recycle me. Or say, hi, I'm made out of 50% mechanically recycled polypropylene, and here's where I came from. We need to be able to tell the whole story, and it really comes to that storytelling, but it also comes to, having that clarity to the message to let people truly know where these things are coming from. And I think that's where we've kind of fallen short. What I can tell you is with legislation, the European Parliament is put through legislation in which is kind of an anti-greenwashing statement. I mean, I hate hearing the terms greenwashing, but what I can tell you is there has been greenwashing where we've been very vague, saying made with recycled content. Well, what type of recycled content was that made from? Is it post-industrial? Is it mechanical? Is it advanced molecular recycled? These are all things that need to be clarified so that the consumers know exactly what they're getting. And what I can tell you is with these anti-greenwashing legislations that are there, we need to have third-party certifications that come along with these particular products, at least having some sort of third party. It's one thing for me to say, Michael, the product that I'm going to deliver to you has 55% post-consumer recycled content. That's great. But where is the documentation that backs it up? Where is the third party audit that says, hey, listen, we physically looked at where these came from. You were able to provide a clear chain of custody. I believe you. Here's where it goes. And then we get a certification that comes along with it. So, not only do we need to work with multiple different chains of recycled technologies, whether they're done through your traditional mechanical recycling, which everyone knows a lot about, whether we get into the post-industrial side, which doesn't get much love from a legislator's perspective these days, but it's going to start to get a little bit more clear based on life cycle assessment. And then when we talk about bioattributed and advanced molecular recycled, how these technologies are all complementary to each other. So it allows us to not only reduce, reuse, recycle, but it also helps us to recircle these products back into the system too as well. So they all have different avenues. And that's why I like to talk about building pathways. There's a pathway to get to the solution. And if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? So we need to kind of build these pathways. We need to construct them. And we need to build them in a way where they're customized. So just like you and I can go to the home improvement store and pick out materials and pick out our sidewalk and pick out our pavers and pick out our foundations, we need to utilize all these technologies together and build them consistently. So it's going to take some collaborative partnerships. It's going to take some empowering and understanding of the technologies. But we need to be able to build those side by side so that we can get to that end goal of sustainability. Just like math, there's multiple ways to solve a problem. There's different types of maths that we can use, but they all get to the same answer. And there's no right way to build a pathway. I mean, the pathway that you have for sustainability might be slightly different than mine. Ford Motor Company is going to have a different perspective than Starbucks. So this is why we need to have all these menu items and have them available so that we can get to these customized pathways, because people are going to want a different, people are going to want to market differently. People are going to want to have a different message that's out there. So we need to be able to do that. One story that I can tell though is that, coffee drinker, I mean, obviously I'm drinking coffee right now. I really didn't start drinking coffee up until about 3 years ago. So my fiance and I, she said, hey, listen, it'd be nice. We can go get coffee. We can go talk things over. But when I went into a Starbucks for the first time, it was overwhelming. How do I get a sugar-free drink? How do I make sure it's a large instead of a medium or a small? I even still stall at the drive-through because I'm afraid I'm going to order what she wants the wrong way. So just, we've got a huge menu, right? So when we talk about these sustainable designs, I mean, even going beyond into intelligent design, which is completely different, where you can lightweight, we can do all kinds of other things. We've got to break it down into digestible chunks. We have to be able to say, this is what it means to be post-consumer recycled. This is what post-industrial pre-consumer is. This is what it is bio-attributed, bio-circular, biopolymers. There's differences in those threes in that middle, right? So, and then what's advanced molecular recycling? We've got to be able to creatively talk about how these all play into each other and how they can all be used in that same pathway that you build to get to sustainability, because there's
You
limits.
talk about the transparency and the collaborative nature of things, right? And but by the way, just get the bold roast venti black. There you go. That's all you need to know.
Hey, listen,
In my opinion, and unless you like the frappuccinos and stuff like that, but um, that's where things start to fall down for me a little bit of what is going on, right? Because it seems like even in, I mean, you got all this confusion for the layperson for where you're going to get your PCR. PCR is a disaster trying to collect PCR, right? I mean, that is it's like trying to create cold fusion almost in recycling, right? That's the difficult nut to crack. And there's all that confusion, but then it seems like you see these reports, like I said today, hey, the plastic industry's been lying to you. Well, that's not exactly true, except maybe, the cover of Life magazine in 1950 when it said, hey, it's the throwaway culture. Here you go. Don't worry about it. That
right,
possibly was misleading in my mind a little bit.
right,
But, things have changed since then. But it seems like all these competing technologies, they try and tear each other down instead of,
working together.
let's work together. Okay, it's not perfect, but it is getting there. I mean, like you and I have talked about pyrolysis before, right? And some of it isn't the greatest in the world, but it's getting to the right place, and it's gonna get there, right? As long as we
Right.
keep promoting it. It's not it's not perfect, so throw it away. That's ridiculous. That's what we can't do that.
Well, and I
Right?
think we have to think about the premise that's behind. So, pyrolysis is a huge hot topic because, when we look at legislation that's been out there, even legislation by the state of New Jersey, S2515, it specifically calls out, pyrolysis and gasification as thermal destructors. So we even have to, from a legislative standpoint, there's got to be a coalescence. So there's got to be, right now, we've got a hodgepodge of legislation that's out there on the states. Hopefully, when California gets their legislation in place and the extended producer responsibility, what happens in California is going to be the way that the rest of the North American market space is going to be. And I can tell you that the legislation that's there, it is somewhat finger lacing with what we're seeing in Europe, which is a good sign. But what we have to deal with is what we have now. So, we mentioned New Jersey S2515. People that are doing pyrolysis, they're taking hard to recycle mixed waste plastics that don't get recycled back into the normal feed streams.
And that's what I don't think people know when they hear that pyrolysis is bad. Well, this stuff is just going to rot or be burned in the open air anyway.
Right. So there's a lot of studies that are out there. So there's a study by Argonne National Laboratories, which is an independent laboratory that goes out and does research. They go out and provide kind of unbiased information that's the market space. So they did a study on pyrolysis, and you can look at pyrolysis in three different phases. You've got the beginning pilot phase, and what I would say, Michael, is that pyrolysis is still in the infancy stages. So if we were to really take a snapshot in time and look at life cycle assessment of pyrolysis oil, which is used as a driver to make polypropylene, polystyrene, polyethylene, it can make nylon. When we look at it where it's at today, the snapshot's not going to be pretty. But as we build that technology, as we get into the modeling of mid-scale to large-scale production, that's where all the sweet spot's going to be, is because we can take pyrolysis oil and we can implement it into our existing manufacturing facilities today through mass balance, or put it into something that's there today to utilize these large-scale infrastructures. And when we get there, when we get to that mid-level, high-level production, the reductions based on what we see from the Argonne National Laboratories independent study show that we would get a savings of around 19 to 63%. So high level 63%, mid level 19%, which is great.
Savings of what in particular? Carbon emission?
Carbon footprint, carbon
Gotcha.
emissions.
Right.
And really that's where we have to kind of classify it, is what am I doing from a greenhouse gas perspective? And right now we are emitting more greenhouse gas in the process because we're in the pilot phase. We're not full scale capacity. Beyond that, though, what everyone needs to be aware of is, number one, we're able to take these hard to recycle mixed waste plastics, meaning, it's films that have both polypropylene and polyethylene commingled inside of them, or there's a nylon mixed in there. So we do have the capability of taking those feedstocks and utilizing those at a fairly high yield and breaking those down into pyrolytic oil, which in turn can make pyrolytic based naphtha, which is the basic fundamental building block of most polymers. Then we can turn it into benzene. Then we can turn it into all these other components. So, being able to get to that building block where we can crack it into other olefins is really exciting. But what everyone needs to remember, though, is these mixed waste products. Most of these mixed waste products don't have a traditional recycling stream today. So they're going to go to landfill. They're going to sit there. Being able to move those particular products into pyrolysis is helpful. The other thing that people need to be reminded about is that traditional recycling, mechanical recycling, where I can take this cap that came from the coffee place that I got, and I can grind it up, and then I can turn it back into a pellet. That takes energy. But first and foremost, we do want to try and do traditional mechanical recycling because that has our highest yield. It's product to product recycling. But I can only take that cap and I can only recycle it 5 to 7 times before all the physical properties go to heck in a handbag. So we have a rule of diminishing return. The more heat cycles that you get, the more the properties start to slope downwards. And eventually you get to the phase where you can't reuse it anymore. So what do you do then? You don't let it go to landfill. I mean, you can burn it, you can incinerate it, but that's not the right way to do it because we add carbon out the door and that becomes a linear process. Eventually we lose the physical properties. So this is why pyrolysis becomes very exciting, is because we can get to that seventh cycle where we don't have any physical properties and take that product and convert it back into the basic foundation building blocks of
Right.
materials
So,
and turn it back into something. So basically what we do is we kind of continue that infinite loop. So
A
it
hundred
and
percent.
yes,
Because, but it's so okay. So that's a great thing to dig into a little bit because there's people who have developed systems of turning or programs where they turn plastics into shoes, right? Adidas and or they make it into right. And the problems with some of those is that it's that first run bottle or that first run cap that gets turned into a shoe and then it's done, right? I mean,
then
pretty
what do you do with the shoe then? What
then what
happens
do you
with the
do with the
shoe?
shoe? Right.
Right,
So it's this we want to take your cap and then the next time I want to use it, and then we'll trade it back and forth 4 or 5 times, and then we'll take it into pyrolysis and do
right.
something. This is what we're trying to advocate, right? I mean that because in my mind that seems to be the right thing to do, and that becomes difficult. But when you go back to what you said about having that QR code, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a way to put a marker in that plastic product, that cap, so that if you were sorting it, you'd know this is its second time around, or its third time around, or its fourth
Yeah,
time around?
so
Or do you have to wait until you test it in your lab and go, I can't use these these
well,
these pellets?
and that's the thing is basically it comes down to testing. I mean, we look at intrinsic viscosity of materials, and basically we can find out based on where that viscosity is whether or not it's been broken down multiple times. Can we say it's been 2 times, 3 times, 4 times? That's really hard to distinguish because it depends on there's lots of factors that are there, and we can talk for this topic for hours and hours. But really, it depends on the process. It depends on the
Yeah,
application. It depends on how far the product had to flow to finish the product. It depends on the processor that ran it. They maybe didn't dry it properly, or they did something else to it. So there's a lot of physical components that we just have to be cognizant about. But really, what it comes down to is just testing that the base materials meet a specific threshold. So depending upon those physical properties, when we take these materials in, we need to be able to classify them as I can use this for a durable good. I can use this for a not so durable good. This would be something I can put into my FDA food grade products. This is something that, because of where it came from a medical market space that was exposed to something that was, not really supposed to be something that's all that great. I'm going to have to use it in this direction into an industrial application. These are all the kind of the decision tree things that have to happen before they go in that direction. But really getting down to it is, putting markers in products. There are technologies that are out there. I mean, we've seen technologies, and again, this is just because my career has been kind of very widespread, but it's more been solutions driven. We've seen technologies that they've implemented into dynamite, where they can say this is a melamine fiber that's stacked in multiple colors, and we can say that this is the country of origin of where it came from. I can put origin things inside there, but you're putting a contaminant into the process. So, you know, do we want melamine fiber to be inside, polypropylene caps? They're going to show up as little specks. It's going to look different. So we have to get the consumers to think differently about what's there. Really, I think being able to put like a 3D barcode, like a pad print on there would be ideal. That would be the holy grail. And I know that there are multiple folks that are working on watermarks that do have the ability of, within a QR code, you can put tons of information. You could put traceability, you can put lot codes, you can put date codes. So the technologies exist. What we really need to do is we need to get a coalescence in the industry, though. We need to get more joint ventures where we're able to, take these products from grave to gate, where it can visibly be done. I can tell you, and I can only talk so much about it because I'm limited, but I can tell you that there is a lot of joint ventures that are in process today. One of which that the organization that I work for is working on is partnering with one of the largest waste services companies in the North American market space, where we will be able to pick up these products from your home. You'll be able to put them inside your recycling bin, your blue recycling bin, and the trucks with our partner will pick up these particular products, and they'll go directly to their owned MRF centers, the facilities where they sort, segregate, and separate the recyclables from PET to polypropylene to polyethylene to PVC, et cetera. And in turn, what we're going to do is we're going to clean and we're going to purify those things to the point where they can be considered FDA compliant again, and then reintroduce those through our compounding capabilities into a new product that can be converted back into the water bottle, or be converted back into the plastic cap, or be converted back into the packaging, in the products that you know and love and find their way back into your households again. So that's the full
So
picture transparency that's there that we need to have as a whole.
100%. I 100%. I 100% agree. And I mean, it is. It's the. I mean, when we talk about pyrolysis and sort, just to take a step back real quick, and I love what you just said, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. But I just want to explain so that people understand this clearly, is that through the single stream process that we have right now, right, and the difficulty with PCR, of post consumer recycled products, and keeping them separate into their. I mean, it's kind of strange, but I think of it. There's single stream, everything's together, but then you want single streams of just single types of plastics, right? You need these.
Yeah,
You need these.
and there's so many differences that are there. I mean, you've got
Yeah,
7 categories right now for recycling. It's hard enough to separate those to begin with. I mean, I struggle when I go to the restaurants and they've got a sortation for compostable, plastics and other things, and I even freeze there. So we're professionals in this field. So there's a lot
yeah,
to
and you
unpack.
still go, well, which ones go where? I'm not really sure. And since I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about, I always feel like there's 10 people taking notes behind me, going, "Ah, you put it in the wrong place." You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
um, so those mixed or contaminated, which aren't necessarily contaminated with nuclear radiation or anything like that. It's mixed up different types of plastics that you can't really separate. It's difficult or very costly to start sorting those. These pyrolysis becomes a decent alternative for these. But also, you could mix these and put them into locked up type of kick the can down the road, like brick pavers and stuff like that as well.
Sure.
But there should needs to be a bit more of that type of stuff. So when you're talking about, okay, you've got this partnership where you're going to bring this, you're going to take it kind of out of that infrastructure, right? Out of that current single stream infrastructure into a more
It's going to be
separated.
clean. Yeah, right. So it's going to be cleaner. It's going to be more segregated. One of the things that's limited right now when we talk about post-consumer recycled is trying to get things that are in colors or keep them consistent. Finding natural feedstocks is a challenge. And then the other thing to keep in mind, there's always a cost versus quality scenario. So typically, the more cost you see from these recycled feed streams, the more engineering that's built into them to make them more consistent. So we as consumers, we as brand owners, we as specifiers have to be, understanding that to get to a specific level, it's going to cost more. And in a lot of cases, some of the post-consumer sources that are really good, clean qualities, they sometimes cost more than the prime virgin materials that are there. But again, the focus needs to be on carbon reduction. Where do we get our most bang for our buck? And for sure, mechanical recycling is there. But beyond that, once these products get to that end of life phase, so we take that coffee cup cap and we've used it 7 times, and now I can't use it again. Pyrolysis also becomes a solution to take that product. So instead of letting that go to landfill and reach end of life and take 300 plus years to biodegrade, we're able to take that and then steal the building blocks that it was started from and use those again. So we continue that loop in this infinite cycle. The other thing that we have to be cognizant about is that pyrolysis, advanced molecular recycling technologies, they help to divert the attention or the need away from finite fossil-based feedstock. So most plastics, they start from crude oil. Crude oil gets branched into heavy and light feed streams. And the thing that people need to be aware of is that to create prime virgin materials, and there's 47,000 different types of plastics that are out there based on the modifications, but to get down to that finished product, it takes a lot of stretching. It takes a lot of molecular chains, and it's very energy intensive. So anywhere where we can jump that line to get away from that traditional prospecting for natural gas and crude oil, it's a huge win. And pyrolysis and other advanced molecular recycling technologies get us there much faster, so we don't have to do conversion. So when we get to larger scale, the carbon footprint that's going to be attached to them is going to be bigger. So again, we get away from this linear process of fossil fuel based energy to create plastic. So that's why advanced molecular and bioattribution can be huge. And then in turn, keep in mind, as you said, and what we've said multiple times, is that it takes these hard to recycle things that typically would go to incineration. And then you can imagine that that linear process is very linear and has a steep increase in regards to carbon emissions because you've got to burn them and get rid of them. So, comparatively speaking, if we compare pyrolysis at mid-scale levels to incineration, your carbon footprint savings is going to be around 139%. So that's significant. So we've got to put one thing that we have to do is when we do
Yeah,
these life
I mean,
cycle
that's
assessments.
no. Back up 1 minute because that's a point I was going to try and get you to emphasize. Was pyrolysis is not incineration.
No,
Incineration, it's burned and you're emitting all that carbon. So all the carbon footprint that occurred producing those polymers is now released again after you burn it. And now you've got to go do that carbon footprint again to
right.
produce virgin. Whereas in pyrolysis, the the process of pyrolysis, if it's done correctly, there's not a whole lot of carbon monoxide coming out of there.
Well,
And there's not a whole lot of NOx coming out. There's some pretty decent stuff that's coming out. And then you're preventing the new carbon footprint because of the virgin doesn't have to be made.
right.
That's
So
where you're getting to that
the amount of it
130.
right, the amount of energy that it takes to take that product back down to a pyrolytic oil is much less than actually taking it from crude oil. Starting from
Right,
that building
right,
block,
right,
because
right,
we
right,
have
right.
so many steps that we have to move down, and you think about the industrial footprint that it takes to break it down. One other thing that I wanted to throw out there is that with the emerging technologies that are there, we talk about the carbon off outputs, or the NO2 type stuff, the NOx that comes out of it. We have carbon capture technologies now that are being
Sure.
implemented into large scale production as well. So carbon capture allows us to take that carbon and turn it back into a polymer as well. So carbon CO2 can be used to produce methanol. CO2 can be used to produce benzene. It can be used to produce multiple different segments. So what we are seeing in the plastics industry as a whole is that there is a evolution in sustainable design in which now we're able to take the carbon outputs that are coming from our manufacturing and reintroduce those back into the polymerization phase to further reduce carbon footprint. So not only are we siphoning that carbon and off gas from the environment, we can implement those back in there.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think the carbon footprint reduction is evangelized enough in plastics recycling. I don't think it occurs to people as much as people in the know, so to speak, like you and I would hope. That it's not out there. People, I talk to people about that, and they're like, "What? I mean, it's just plastic. Does it sit there and emit carbon?" But and then you have to go through the whole cycle of how it's produced, like you said. I
it's
don't think
not
we do a
easy.
good enough job of doing it. I think people would be more apt to recycle and more on board if they understood just how much of a carbon footprint the plastic industry has in the virgin form and production, right?
Well, and that's the thing too, as well, is that I would say that 75% of my time is focused on educating. So,
Yeah,
really, we need to get good educators out there. I mean, Michael, you do a great job educating the general
appreciate that.
consumer and public, and that's really where I get on my soapbox to just start to talk about. Here's how we need to start thinking. I mean, when we talk about if you want to use post-consumer mechanically recycle, you need to have a transformative, and that word transformative is important. We need to have a transformative mindset, meaning that am I, as a consumer, willing to accept this plastic cup, which I see as a beautiful white color right now, and would I be willing to accept this in a gray or a black or another color? That's one thing from an engineering and a design perspective that we have to start thinking about. The other thing that we need to do is we need to start to tie the numbers to these studies, right? So we need more resources that understand, like the Association for Plastics Recyclers, APR. They have studies out there that'll show if we look at traditional recycling for polypropylene, polyethylene, PET, there's a range of carbon footprint savings if we recycle that and use it back into the same application again and again, that carbon footprint savings versus using a prime virgin material could be anywhere between 61 and 71% savings. So that's a huge win. There are newer studies out there that are showing that mechanically recycled products can even show as much as 88% carbon footprint savings. So the general consumer is like, well, I recycled this and I reused it. Why isn't it not 100%? And it's the reason why it's not 100% is because there's energy in transportation, there's energy in breaking it back down, there's energy in repelletizing and then recreating it into the finished goods. So that's something that we need to be cognizant about, is that we need to do what we can on those particular levels to support those specific needs. But there's a lot of unpacking that we have to do. I mean, number one, we have to be able to explain these technologies in generalized terms clearly and consistently. So we need some consistency in the market space. The talking points only go so far.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier. You said that we got to get consumers to think differently or to see the products differently, right?
Right.
And is that not a function of marketing? And doesn't the onus come upon the producers of those
Yes.
products to
So
start to market to people that, hey, look for this. This is where the quality is, not in this pristine white or this really cool metallic foil. It is in the
so
dark gray nasty looking stuff. That's actually the quality stuff, right? I mean,
right. So really it comes down to extended producer responsibility. So, the producers that manufacture it, some of the onus comes back onto that. But beyond that, we need so sustainability, very wide ranging concept. You can put circularity in there, you can put legislation, we could put empowerment of people. It doesn't work unless we've got consumer legislators, converters, and the end market users all involved at the table. So there's got to be a coalescence there. But how do we do that, and how do we make it work? Well, number one, we make it work by having legislation in place that does put some onus back on the brand owners to focus on recyclability of products. So what do we mean by recyclability of products? Mono material development. If we can put a product into a singular material, so let's say we've got a cup that's an all inclusive thing. We want to make sure that the cap is polypropylene and that the cup is polypropylene. And if they're welded together, that the whole thing can be recycled. That helps promote more mechanical recycling, give you a better carbon footprint. So that's one thing. Beyond that, from a design responsibility perspective, we have to take into consideration, the end use. So how do we motivate the consumer? So when we talk about extended producer responsibility, that's great, where we put the onus back on the producers to say, I'm educating people on how to recycle these, and these are the efforts we're making. But beyond that, studies show that recycling refunds have a huge impact in regards to how much consumers are willing to go ahead and recycle. So if you put, for every bottle that you return, you're going to get 10 cents. That's going to motivate me. That's going to motivate consumers that, can see that as a feed stream of income, or see that as an incentive to do so. So you give incentives not only to the consumers, but you give incentives to the manufacturers that are willing to take on these things. And there are things that are there, but again, in true capitalism fashion, there's 15,000 different directions going at once. So we've got to get a little bit
and
more.
that's
We've got to
part of
get
the problem, though,
right.
too, right?
But where we're getting at though is we're getting to the point where we're going to start to have extended producer responsibility. We need to have recycling refunds built into that too as well. But we also need to have design built into it. So we need to be able
Yes,
to design for better consistency. We need to be able
yes.
to label efficiently. I can tell you, I look at labels all the time, and I look at the recycling codes that we have. And to be honest, it's a great starting point, but they're still confusing. What I can tell you is that there are people that are putting number ones, meaning PET, which is the most recycled product globally all around, which is great. But there's also people mixing PETG into it, which those don't mix together.
No,
PETG
they
is a
don't.
number seven, PET is a number one. Can they be advanced molecular recycled together? Yes, that's a good solution. But at the same time, though, we have people mislabeling things. So that becomes an issue. So we've got to have some decision tree guidelines that are available to everyone so that we keep things consistent. We've got to work with brand owners and producers to create materials that are made out of kind of a single material development, if possible. If not, if they require better vapor transmission, permeation, oxygen permeation, use materials that can be complementary to each other. So take polypropylene and polyethylene, they can then be converted into pyrolysis, or take polypropylene, polyethylene, and polyamide that can be converted into pyrolysis, and make sure that those are together. It's when we get into these special mixtures that things get very complex. I mean, we have a very dynamic, evolved system as consumers. Consumers in general, though, they want it to have all the bells and whistles. They want it to be cost effective. But we've got this appetite for luxury. We've got this appetite for certain things. So that's kind of have to be somewhat addressed. But at the same time, the good news is, though, is that today we can provide sustainable solutions from every product, from polyethylene or polypropylene all the way up to polyether. It really depends on the technologies, and we have to weigh those sacrifices. So Do we want to pay more for an advanced molecular recycle or a bioattributed material? Yes. Or do we want to go this mechanical route? Well, if we go this mechanical route, we're going to have to make some sacrifices along the way. So we just need to do a better job of educating the folks that are there.
I think you're 100% right, and I think part that the I mean you touched on a whole bunch of stuff. The I was in logistics for, well, I still am in logistics. I contend that what I'm doing in I mean, everything you just talked about is logistics, from the design of the product and everything else it's all logistics, right? Where you're getting your raw materials. Is it virgin? Is it recycled? How are you going to get it back? Are you going to mechanically recycle it? How do you get the circular supply chain going? All of that
Yep.
is there. I think, well, I would like to ask you this. What is, if you put a priority on one, do you think the priority for product design, giving all the other things that we're talking about, is of a high should be of a higher priority, or is it the education of what we already have? Because it seems to me, even if we educate till we are blue in the face, like you said, there's 47,000 different kinds, and some of them are mixed and some of them aren't. And I think that, you know, just like in logistics that I've been in, the consumer didn't come up and say, "Hey, I demand 2-hour delivery from Walmart." No, it was sold to the consumer, right?
Right.
And the
Right.
sustainability of that is awful. Every time that truck comes down your street, you're pumping another pound of NOx down your kids' throats. Every time you order a 2-hour delivery, so think about that before you do it next time, right, people? But so you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
these products that we have and the functionality and, like you said, the luxury, and we all like luxury, obviously, but a lot of that was sold to us, right? We didn't go out and say, "Hey, I got to have an iPhone." Steve Jobs created the necessity for a cell phone, right?
And that's the beauty of an entrepreneurial market space, right? I mean, we've got a flexible, nimble consumer that's willing to kind of has an appetite for technology, has an appetite for
Yes,
innovation. So let's focus on the excitement of the innovation in the design of the finished product. One thing that we can say is that, 3 out of 4 consumers, whether or not you have a sustainable note on your product or it comes from a sustainable manufacturing process, in a survey, a broad survey of individuals, 3 out of 4 individuals said that they would choose the sustainable product over the non-sustainable product. So that's a huge KPI. That's a huge indicator that we can look at. So let's get excited about the design of the product. Let's go out there and market to say, hey, listen, you know what, consumer, we care about the environment. We care about what your future is going to be for you, for your kids' kids, and their kids. And what we decided to do is we decided to redesign our product into a mono material, single material design so that we can exemplify the recyclability. So we don't have to go back and mine these finite, crude, fossil based resources and go there. So the solutions are there. We have to build and exemplify and amplify the design behind it. So if we're able to amplify that further, we need to make that exciting. So let's make it exciting. I mean, look at what's going on for the EV market space or the hybrid vehicles. When hybrids came out, people were really excited about it. Everybody wanted a Prius or everybody wants a Tesla. But what we also have to do is get the excitement behind those products, but we also need to design with sustainable materials. So, I've gone and spoken at EV battery conferences and saying it's great that we have these EV vehicles and that they're sustainable products that go out there, but what are we doing for the materials too that are being made in these products? So we need to design with sustainable materials too as well. So I mean, again, we need to make recycling and designing for reusability and recycling sexy. We need to make it exciting, right?
yes, yeah,
And it's getting there. I mean, I can tell you that, there's polls out there that show that people are willing to pay anywhere between 19% and 29% more for a product if it's got sustainability built into it.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, again, it really comes
Okay, so
down to
let me ask you this about that, though. Let me ask you this about that. So, in talking with people, to offtake agreements of, because I'm in mechanical recycling, you know that. So, in talking to people about the offtake agreements, the success comes with consumer products, right? Or where marketing comes into play. That's where the interest of using these repros or recycled, reprocessed plastics comes into play, and they're willing to pay that extra amount because it costs more. It just does than virgin. Where it, where the huge consumption of these could be, but isn't, is in the industrial products. Because nobody cares if a drain pipe is virgin or recycled. You're not going to market that to the people and go, "Oh, wow, that drain pipe under the road is recycled plastic." They don't care, so they're
Right.
not going to pay for that. How do we get into that? Does that have to be legislated, or is that just
Yeah,
something
well,
that
I mean, it's
um,
just like, we talked about legislation for extended producer responsibility. We need to have an understanding that the end goal really comes down to your carbon emissions, your carbon footprint. So, what I can
yes,
tell you is that, legislation in Europe, CSRD, extended producer responsibility in California, are really going to be focused on, hey, what are you as an organization, are your scope one, scope two, and scope three emissions? So, scope one and scope two are more like risk aversion. Everyone kind of got a handle on it. We can go to solar power, we can go to green energy, we can go to different industries, and we can do this. But those typically only equate to like 7 to 10% of your overall carbon emission. So it's great to get there and do those things, but we have to look at scope three emissions, which are things that are out of your control, things that you could supply in. Where I'm getting at with this concept is that when it comes to carbon footprint, carbon output, is if we're monitoring the industry, and basically saying that you need to disclose, what your carbon emissions are, which is what California is going to push the market space to do. If your organization is bigger than $500 million or $1 billion as a whole, and you participate in California economy, it's going to be important for them to be able to disclose the carbon footprint. And what's going to happen is that now we have financial institutions that are using carbon emissions, decarbonization as a lever to get preferential interest rates. So, most industry, they rely heavily on getting loans to finance new business development, because if the cost of money is low or you can get a better interest rate, it makes a significant difference in your business. So, globally, the GRI, which compromises a significant amount of the financial availability or financing that's out in the market space, they are heavily looking at decarbonization. So if you can report that you're having decarbonization and you're getting to a specific point, that's a huge win. So, legislation is big. I mean, just like seatbelts, not everybody started wearing seatbelts until you started getting tickets for $50 or $175 for not wearing a seatbelt. We do have to have some sort of legislation in play. I mean, unfortunately, we do have to swing the stick sometimes to get people to make the change. Um, Eventually, it becomes adapted and it just becomes commonplace, and it becomes kind of just ingrained into our culture. And once we get to that point, we'll be there and we'll be much better off. But yes, we've got to look at that carbon footprint. So that drain pipe manufacturer, even though they don't see why they can use a specific product in there, and why would I use it because it's going to cost me 10% more. Well, now there is a motivator for them to do it, because if they don't, the Department of Transportation that purchased that drain pipe that runs underneath that highway is not going to do it, because they are being mandated to make better carbon sensitive decisions. So,
yeah, sure. Funding for highway projects, et cetera, might depend on carbon footprint, et cetera, and that would push down to the
I mean,
drain pipe. So
honestly,
yeah,
Michael, we're looking at things
yeah,
down to the logistics, right? Reducing miles
yeah.
to customers. I mean, being a distribution company, your logistics scope three emissions could be up to 88% of your overall emissions. It could
Yeah.
be
Oh, yeah. No,
significant.
I
So,
get it. I'm in transportation. Have been for 36 years. Logistics, and yeah, it's significant. Freight. You hear freight is the F word in recycling, right? And it really is.
but you know what though, it's an opportunity though for us as well. I
That's
mean,
the way I see it. It's
I
a
can
big
tell
opportunity.
you, that overall, we are, the last 2 3 years have been more risk aversion. I need, as an organization, to have a sustainability plan. So now we've got these ideas, we've got these marketing pieces behind it. Now what has to happen is we need to have the propellant, or the rocket fuel put into the process to move forward into sustainable design. So folks like you and I, we're extremely busy, because what's happening now is that we've been at the starting blocks for a long time. The gun's gone off. Now we start to see legislation coming into place. So we're seeing people scrambling, looking for solutions, looking for some consultancy on whether or not their product is going to meet a specific legislation. And what's happening is I really see the progress moving forward. So when we've talked about early on, when you talked about those quotes in regards to plastics being part of the solution to the environmental challenges of our time, they really are. We have solutions today. The important thing that people need to know is that the solutions do exist. If you come to me and tell me that I want to create a sustainable product, but I can't sacrifice any of the physical properties, I have solutions today. I can give you a bioattributed, biocircular based feedstock where the materials come from cooking oil that came from McDonald's, Wendy's, or Burger King, and I'm able to convert that into bioattributed benzene and then bioattributed phenol and then bioattributed bisphenol, and then voila, I've got a polycarbonate or polycarbonate ABS that can make your cell phone housing, and I can give that to you without any
Yeah.
sacrifice of physical property.
Or a biodiesel. I mean, they make diesel out of that stuff
Yeah,
as well,
I
right?
mean, and that's the other thing to talk about too, as well. Is so like everyone's really interested. We talked about pyrolysis, and they're talking about the fuels that can come from them. Well, that can be somewhat linear in that you sell the biofuel, and then they use it, and then it gets burned up, and then it's gone. Again, we need to kind of continue to work on ways of building in that circular messaging. Now, we do need to look at alternative energies for the freight logistics industry. We need to find a better carbon limited carbon output that's there. But again, it comes down through that collaboration, right? We need to have this collaborative spirit. There's got to be this participation for the goals. Otherwise, we're never going to stay within that 1.5 degrees Celsius year over year goal that came from the Paris Accord, the Paris agreements that are there. But what I can tell you is that the exciting thing is that the technologies are here. The technologies are available today. And we can give you a product that has a 29% carbon footprint reduction versus the traditional product without sacrificing any physical properties. So think about it this way. You make a product out of a specific material. It's been made out of this material for the last 15 years because of regulatory compliancy, chemical resistance, physical properties. And today, through advanced molecular recycling, I can make you that same product, but give you a 29% carbon footprint reduction. There's going to be a cost associated. So the value proposition is no physical property loss, give you all the clarity and luster and the cosmetic appeal, give you all the physical properties that you wanted, but there's a price tag that comes along with it. So if it's 50 cents per pound or 85 cents per pound, we have to look at it down to the piece part cost scenario. But you don't have to take it all at once at 100%. You can blend it in at 50%. You can blend it in at 10%.
Yeah,
So
and there's a lot. That's a fair point. There's a lot that are doing that. I deal with a lot of people who are just getting into it, and some that are in it, and some of them have been into it for a couple of years are still only at 30%,
right.
and they're figuring out ways how to increase that content because what they're discovering is that there's of the 47,000 or however many there are different types of plastics. They're really starting to play with different things. Taking some foils into different aspects makes this product a little bit better than they ever thought it would be, right? And because they never played with those type of combinations before, and there's all kinds of exciting things that are being done for sure.
Yeah, and on the chemical side, or even in the additives like glass fiber, we can actually recycle glass fiber now. We can actually re-put these back in there. So it even
Which
gets
would be
down,
great. That'd be great for wind, solar or wind power,
yeah,
because that's the big issue with wind power is what do you do with all the fiberglass?
yeah. But now we're finding we can actually recycle carbon fiber too as well. So I mean, I think one thing from a consumer perspective, so whether or not you're just getting involved in the industry, not involved in industry at all, the important thing to understand is that the technologies are there. What we have to do in a concerted fashion is we have to be able to ask for these things. We have to say, you know what, I've got an appetite for this. I'm willing to take a step forward and utilize this. I'm willing to say, hey, you know what, this cup doesn't need to be white, it can be gray. I'm willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that because I want to do a better job for the environment. We also need to have other motivators out there. So, sustainability in general, it's a very complex topic, and the understanding and meaning of sustainability has to be somewhat consistent. We need to get terms out there where people can understand what that definition of that term means. What does a third party organization like ISCC stand for? It stands for International Sustainability Carbon Credit Certification. Well, what is a third party organization? Why is it important to have a third party organization put a stamp on a product that comes to me? Because we want to avoid greenwashing. So we need more industry leaders that are out there willing to advocate, to be excited about the technologies. We also have to kind of put the sexy back into, product design. We need to make product design that cosmetic component to say, hey, listen, if you can make your earphones out of a recycled material, that's a lot cooler than making your earphones out of this other material. So, and I'd love to say, what we can do is we can make them glow in the dark still. We can still make them do all these other things. But we really have to kind of be able to get back to that design level phase. And I think where engineers and designers and inventors have been stuck is they just don't know that the technologies are out there. They don't, they get stuck being, well, I'm going to use a recycled material. Well, it's going to fall apart and it's not going to work. Well, you don't have to use a traditional recycled material. You can go to these other 5 technologies that will give you everything you need, and you'll still get a carbon footprint savings. And I think what we
You
need to
can
do is
take the recycled materials and take them to a compounder and have the specifications exactly what you want. And like you said before, it doesn't have to be at the beginning 100% recycled content. You
no.
can get a 90%, you can get a 10%, you get a 5%, you get a whatever you need to be. Listen, we are out of time, but that was the way to end things right there, because I want to call you the Justin Timberlake of sustainability now, because you brought in the secret phrase, get my sexy back.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd like to keep that name, but I'll take it for right now. So,
I just thought it was awesome that you said we got to get our sexy back.
right.
And I agree with you 100%. We got a couple more minutes, Adam. I mean, that was a great thing to say. I really enjoyed our talk today. Is there one thing left that you want to say that you'd like
Yeah,
to get out
I
there,
think
people?
really what it comes down to is that when we look at the intersection of polymers and people, it's going to be these collaborative partnerships that are going to be needed to make the needle move. So, we collide together at these intersections. We need to be clear. We need to be transparent. We need to be able to provide life cycle assessment. We need to have third party organizations involved. We need to get a coalescence of legislation where we include extended producer responsibility, recycling refunds. And then beyond that, we just need people to understand that the sustainable design is available. We don't have to make sacrifices, and we do have to make sacrifices. It really just depends on how much reduction and how much carbon footprint you want to limit into the market space. The great news is, though, is that today, more so than ever, I truly believe that we are staged and ready to make a difference. Is there enough availability for everybody today? If everyone came in and said, I want this recycled product, could we deliver upon it? No. But this is why we have to have differentiated products. This is why we have to have complementary mechanical recycling, pre-consumer recycling, bioattributed, biocircular, biopolymers, and advanced molecular recycling, because in combination, we can make a big dent. And we just need to get more folks ready to take that jump. What I can say is that there's people like me, people like you that are willing to walk with you side by side down that pathway to sustainability. And we're happy to shine a flashlight down that pathway. We're happy to clear the weeds for you. I'm happy to roll my sleeves up and get dirty every day to make it happen. And we've got individuals that are dedicated to do it. So, again, I truly believe that we're able to make a difference. I'm committed to this. You're committed to this. There's industries and people that are making a big difference, and we're going to get there together, but we've got to do it in a concerted effort.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Adam. Everybody, this has been the Sustainiacs. We'll catch you next time. Peace and love.